One of my many hobbies is photography, and I've been going down the rabbit hole of the photography advice videos on YouTube recently. One thing that keeps popping up is that you should be printing your work out at least every once in a while. Pick some photo that you like from a shoot, print it out, see if you still like it when you're holding it in your hand. I also just so happen to move to a new place that has a lot of blank wall space that needs to be covered up. So I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to try printing out some of my photographs. I started doing research on printers and I came across, a fair amount of different options. But then I remembered I have a printer at home. This is my Canon MG2522. I bought this printer probably about 3 years ago because it was the cheapest printer that Walmart had and I needed to print a document. Not a good reason to buy a printer. Obviously, I didn't review anything. It's been a printer, that is to say. It has all kinds of problems and doesn't work very well, and I wouldn't recommend buying one. But it exists. I have it. So it effectively doesn't cost me any money to try to print some images with it. In keeping with the cheap theme here, I went to Walmart again and bought a couple of these guys. So this is actually Pen Plus Gear. This is the Walmart brand of stationery products, I guess you'd call it. Pens, pencils, whatever, pen and gear. That's their own in-house brand. But this box has 50 sheets of 4x6 glossy photo paper in it. It's the cheapest one that they had. There was also some HP glossy photo paper that you could buy. So I got a couple of those. They were, I think, $7.42 a box, which is about 15 cents per sheet, which is pretty cheap. I also got some bigger paper. So this is same brand, but this is 8.5 by 11 inch glossy photo paper. I think this was around $10, maybe $12 for this one. Still relatively cheap. And you'll see, these say, for use with any inkjet printer on them. So theoretically, my $40 3-year-old printer should be able to use these things. And of course it can, though there's some caveats, of course. So I started off with the 4x6 images. So I set the printer to a preset of 4x6 inch paper. I told it to fill the image as large as I could onto the paper, and I told it that it was glossy photo paper. I ended up with images like this, which look okay, if you don't look at it too closely at least. Obviously the first thing you'll notice is the chin of the image, so to speak, down here is quite large compared to the rest of the bezels on it. This printer will not do borderless printing. And this is actually, I think, a limitation of how well it can handle the paper. I think it needs that much paper on the end in order to grip it. So you always end up with a big gap on the bottom. Now you can scale this differently so that it's centered and you have even borders all the way around it. But I printed it like this, and besides it gives you a place to hang on to it, so it's not the worst thing in the world, I don't think. Now if you start looking at this closer, so if you look at it about like there, especially in something that should be a solid color like the sky, you'll start seeing the individual dots of ink on the paper. But if you're not paying so much attention to that and you're looking more down like at the rocks in the bottom here, it's not so bad. The other thing I noticed is that the way this printer handles the paper, so where the paper handling rollers grab it, it ends up putting a nice mark. There it is, right there. So you get a nice mark on your image from this printer without ever touching it, and every one of these has that on it. Now, I'm not sure that the color accuracy is particularly amazing, but to my eyes, it really doesn't look too bad. So here's another image. I was playing around with some macro equipment on the camera that I was recording this with, and this is actually just a picture off my old Galaxy Note 9, so at this point, that was a smartphone from 2018, so pretty old. Start getting into this, the blacks look fine. These look okay. So, some flower picture. There's another one. front of a lighter. So we'll move on to some bigger prints. We have this guy here. You'll see this one kind of looks overexposed. It's almost like there's not enough ink down here. But looking at the original picture, it also kind of looks like that. So yeah, that might just be the original source image. So one weird thing about this printer is that it will not allow you to use glossy photo paper with anything besides either a 4x6 sheet of paper or a 5x7 sheet of paper. Those are your two options. So this is actually printed using the photo on plain paper setting, and then I am turning the quality from normal to high in order to try to get a little bit better. And I'll show you what happens if you don't do that, but this looks okay. If you start looking closer, you'll start seeing that there's some lines going sort of this direction, and that's from where the print head goes back and forth. But I think if you're looking at this from a distance, you'd never really notice that. And you'll see this one, I printed it so that it scaled it so that everything was a nice even border. This picture was not like that, so you see my border quite thick on the bottom, just like the 4x6, and it's a little bit bigger. Again, looks fine. You start looking closely at the sky, you'll start noticing the individual dots of ink. Not too crazy. You got this little guy. So when you start looking at pictures like this where you got a lot of sky in them, you'll kind of see that there's sort of distinct areas that are shaded differently. So up here's kind of a darker blue, and you start looking at it closely, you can tell where it's using kind of a limited number of colors and dots that it can actually put to make different shades, and you'll notice the sections of different colors if you start looking at it real closely. And then there's pictures like this where you print it out and you realize, this looks pretty good on a smartphone screen, but it's blurry. You see the camera move during the long exposure, and there's some streaks in the stars and things. So when you have pictures like this and you don't have that nice solid blue color in the sky, you really can't tell that it was done on a super cheap printer, other than the fact that it's not a borderless print. So I was talking about the differences in settings and how you can't set glossy photo paper for these larger prints. And I think this image kind of shows you where the downside of that is. You'll notice this area is almost just black on this image. Whereas if you look at the 4x6 version of the print, there's actually some detail in here, and it looks quite a bit better than it does on the larger print. So this print was done using plain paper on the normal setting, I believe. And you'll notice it kind of has a lot of lines going this way as well. And that's, again, from the print heads moving back and forth. They kind of spray in a pattern, and the paper moves and it sprays in another line. This is slightly better when you use high quality mode when you're printing. It makes the lines running this way a lot less noticeable, and it gives you a little bit more detail in the areas like that. The ink cost is obviously going to be a major problem of running an inkjet printer. That's just how these things work. You buy the printer for $40, and it comes with these really low capacity ink cartridges that you get like 6 sheets out of. And then you have to go buy new ink cartridges, and they're like $50-$60 for the pair. This printer is obviously no different than that, but I, being me, went out and bought the cheapest, seemingly reasonably decent quality ink refill kit on Amazon. I think I paid like $11 for this Amoya ink refill kit, and it comes with most of the things you need to refill an ink cartridge. So it comes with 4 syringes, 4 needles, and then black, magenta, cyan, and yellow inks. Now, to tell you the truth, I actually used that ink cartridge refill kit to refill my black ink quite a long time ago because it ran out. But I haven't used the color ink, and I wasn't sure how much of a difference there would be between the original HP color ink and this color ink. So when I started getting images like this, I popped the color ink cartridge out, took out my drill, drilled a hole in each of the 3 chambers. Then I used the syringes to fill up the individual ink wells. I put about 2 milliliters of ink in each one, and it is a bit of a struggle to do this without making a mess, because if you kind of make a film of the ink over the hole that you drilled, it'll make bubbles and they'll pop and you'll get ink kind of all over the top of the cartridge. So there's some cleanup involved if you're not careful. But after refilling the cartridge, I popped it back in the printer and kept going. And to be honest with you, I can't tell the difference in colors between the original HP ink cartridge and the cheap knockoff ink that I found on Amazon. I'm not even sure how much ink is in each one of those bottles. I think it's something like 200 milliliters. They're not labeled, which is kind of interesting. But anyhow, I kept printing, and I figured I'd keep printing until eventually the printer told me that it was refusing to print using those ink cartridges. So there are several failures, I will say, where I ran out of blue ink fairly repeatedly. And there was this one where I ran out of ink and I paused it mid-print and I tried to reprint it onto the same paper, and you can see it's like extra dark, which is kind of amusing, but that's there. Now, I was actually really surprised how long it let me print with quote-unquote low ink. So I refilled that ink cartridge, I ran it all the way out again, refilled it again, and it was somewhere at that second refill where it finally said, nope, I'm not printing anymore. As it turns out, the one redeeming quality of this printer is that if you press and hold the stop button for 5 or 10 seconds, it'll ignore this, and it stops caring if the ink cartridge is quote-unquote empty, and you can just keep going. Now, the ink cartridge indicator lights will sit there flashing away, warning you that you don't have any ink left. Of course, these things don't actually have sensors in them. They're just counting how much ink goes out. They have no idea that they've been refilled. So we can just keep on printing. I actually ended up refilling the ink cartridge a total of 4 times during this printing extravaganza. And I printed about 75 4x6 photos and a dozen or so of the 8.5 by 11 guys. So anyway, the point of all of this is you can take your $40 printer and your $11 ink refill kit and make fairly decent looking prints. Now, somebody that knows a lot about this could probably go up to these and go, oh, this print doesn't look that great, because you can start seeing the individual dots and stuff, but from across the room it's going to look absolutely fine, and I think you'd really have to be trying to find faults with them like I've been doing in this video in order to really have issues with these. I have 2 main complaints with this process and this printer for this application. One is that you can't do borderless printing, so you end up with a border around your photos no matter what. My other complaint is you can't use the glossy preset for larger sizes of paper, and that just seems like a dumb limitation that's set by the software of this thing. This video is a little different from what I normally do, but I kind of thought it was a fun little side project that I thought I'd share with the internet. So anyway, I'll see you in the next one, guys. Bye.